Hey everybody, welcome to the Superintendent Effect, where we highlight strong leaders building strong communities. I'm Ann Brown, the President and CEO of the Cook Center for Human Connection, and I'm so proud to be joined today by Tobin Novasio, Superintendent of Hardin School District in Hardin, Montana. Hey Tobin, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Ann. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all the work we've been able to do together over the years.
It is awesome. You know, Tobin, you have been a champion of mental health for as long as I've known you, and through multiple school districts. Tell me about where that passion comes from.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, I always say that it kind of goes back to my first origins in education. So my first teaching degree, my first teaching position was high school health. One of the things that we built a lot of things around when I was teaching PE and health was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm a true believer, and I think that we as a nation actually do a good job of identifying and meeting kids' physical needs in order to meet that Maslow's hierarchy. But where we've dropped the ball a little bit is on that mental health side of it. And I can even go back to my own personal story. I mean, I was a kid, bounced around a little bit through school, especially those critical years, 8th grade and 9th grade. Went from small town Montana to big city Las Vegas, and then back to small town Montana in a different small town. And right around that same time, as I was the new kid 2 years in a row, my grandmother passed away, and my grandma was my person. And I look back now, and I know that my freshman and sophomore years, I was basically dealing with an undiagnosed depression. And I don't put any blame on my teachers or anybody at that time, because I was a new kid. They didn't know how I'd behaved before and stuff, and so I just worked through it on my own. One of my mantras I talk about all the time is I hope that I can give my teachers better resources and better training than I got as a teacher, and I hope that I can give my students better opportunities and better education than I got as a student.
Yeah. Well, talk about some of the resources. I know you were an early adopter of Hope Squad. Tell me about Hope Squad and how you've seen that work and support your students.
Yeah, Hope Squad's one of my favorite things I've been able to be involved in. We had a unfortunate incident, and I think probably most people that are listening to this podcast have probably been through that situation where you've had to go to a funeral of a student that has died through suicide. Quite far down my career, we had a young lady that was just kind of on nobody's radar. She wasn't a kid nobody was worried about. In fact, I think if we had to rank, 1 to 100 the kids we were worried about, she was going to be in the 90s. Like, she was that type of kid. And we found after the fact that there were some signs that we had missed that our friends were aware of, but we as adults had no idea about, because she was able to keep that facade up. And I was actually involved at an ASA event similar to this, and I just started asking people what do they do in their states, because in Montana we were all kind of doing the same thing, and just trying to find out what they were doing. And I don't even remember who said it to me, but somebody said, well, there's this program out of Utah, we don't use it, but some of our neighboring schools do. And so I did some research and ended up connected with Dr. Greg Hudnall. Once we got on the phone, like, it was just synergy. Like, the stories he told were so similar to the stories that I told. And what I love about Hope Squad is kids are going to know what's going on. When I was a high school principal, I used to say the average sophomore knows way more about what's going on in the school than I do as the administrator, because they know who Bobby's dating and Sally's dating, and they're fighting, and this person's, parents are out of work. The kids know those things, and so the idea for Hope Squad is that first level of defense is kids notifying adults when they're worried about a friend. I also like the fact that it cuts across all cliques. Like your Hope Squad, one thing Greg talks about is your Hope Squad shouldn't look like your student council. It should be a wide variety of kids. All the different cliques you have in a high school all have different mental health problems and different challenges. So was able to connect with Greg right away, and we were Lockwood Schools where I was at previously. We became the first adopter of Hope Squad in Montana. And since then it's spread across the state like wildfire, including my new district. We have a Hope Squad there as well too. And it's been a real great way to be preventative and proactive with kids' mental health.
Yeah, well, thank you for that work. And after that is when we met, and you caught the vision of parent guidance as well, and how supporting parents can really help support the children. And you said something so impactful to me that I actually quote everywhere, so I'm going to quote it again, but then I'm going to let you talk about this. You said to me that time is, if you can help a family when that first child is struggling, you might be helping the second and the third and the fourth child as well. And that just has resonated to me, just the waterfall effect of if you help the parent, you're going to help the entire family. And so tell me about, parent guidance and how that's impacted your district.
Yeah. So like you said, Dan, when you guys were first starting the parent guidance idea, I was in a district where I've been fortunate to be in, kind of mid-sized districts most of my career where there's silos. So, we have one elementary, one middle school, one high school. And I was seeing the big picture at the district level where, the elementary, we might have a kid in elementary school we were struggling with attendance, and a middle school kid that was struggling with maybe anger management, and then a high school kid that we were trying to keep from dropping out. But then when you take a step back, you realize they're all from the same family. And so again, if we can give the parents better resources and they're better at setting boundaries or whatever they might be struggling with, it could impact all three of those kids. And that's where I see the return on investment for something like parent guidance for the district level is so important, is that you're able to take some of that stress off of your principals at every level or your counselors at every level. And a lot of times those families also have younger siblings that are coming up as well too. So yeah, we've had parent guidance in my previous district and my current district, and it's actually one of my favorite tools that we have. One of the stories I always tell is, I can't tell you how many times when I was teaching or when I was a principal, would have a conversation with a family about a student that they were having challenges with. And the other thing is, it turns out, like, sometimes parents won't let you in on this, but very rarely is a kid very perfectly and well behaved at home and then comes to school and causes a lot of trouble.
That's true.
When you get through the barriers and the challenges and you have real honest conversations, if we're dealing with disrespect and kids not getting stuff turned in, a lot of times they're dealing with that at home too. The disrespect, they're not doing their chores, those kind of things. And so finding that way to become partners with the family, extending that olive branch, like, we're in this together, how can we work together on this? But oftentimes as a principal or even as a superintendent, families would say, I just don't know what to do with this kid. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I love that we work with you guys on is we have the cards that have the QR code for parent coaching. Like, here you go. Here's option one. Here's something you can do where you can get some ideas to help with the parenting of this child and maybe help get them to get on that right path. It goes from that powerless to having some power to help the parents, and it establishes that connection of the school and the family are in this together. I think my current district primarily services Native American students, and we service a lot of students on the Crow Reservation and the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. Well, there's a distrust that goes back generations, with the violations of treaties and those type of things. And so being able to find a way to get those families that maybe haven't felt like they've been supported by the schools to feel like they have that support and feel like it's a partnership is hugely important to me.
Well, and I love that you talked about the partnership. Our very first coaching client came from, I think, your previous district.
Yeah.
But, she stayed with us through 2 students and about 18 months. And I think really, we really had an impact. And that's when we kind of knew that this was going to be a project that works. And it takes somebody who is willing to try something new, try something innovative in the name of helping kids. And I've watched you do that with so many things. One of the things we're working on now is Eliza Chat. That's a thought partner for kids, but also a way that kids can immediately get help from an adult, either for themselves or for a friend. And we're hoping that's going to be something that's life-changing and game-changing for kids as well.
Yeah, I think we were one of the pilot districts for Eliza Chat, and I actually remember this conversation goes back 3 or 4 years now, I think, when you called me up and said, hey, what do you think of this? What's your first gut instinct on this? And I think I was pretty negative about it at first. Yeah. I was like, this is going to be a liability nightmare. This is going to be, and obviously my knowledge of AI has improved since then. And now I'm absolutely an advocate. Like I said, we were one of the pilot districts, and I think every question I was able to, that's one of the things I love about working with you guys at the Cook Center is I think that every one of those questions I was able to pose, you guys came back with an answer and answered it for me. And one of the things I've shared with Eliza Chat is, and we're in a district where we're short-handed counselors right now. We haven't had a school psych in 3 years. But when kids reach out to an adult, that adult has to go back and reference what they remember from their classes or what tools they've had that have been successful, whereas Eliza Chat's able to actually access all the protocols, all the proper protocols. And the other thing about Eliza Chat is it's on the clock 24/7.
Yeah.
I obviously, one of the things we try to work with our staff with to try and avoid staff burnout, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about staff guidance after this, but is being able to step away from the job. Well, I don't want my counselors to feel like they have to be on the clock 24/7 because kids might reach out. I mean, obviously, if they do reach out, they will respond. But having the kids have another level before they get to that, I think, is really important.
And also, I think it's important that, I'm sure you have a good partnership with your law enforcement partners, and so they can help us in those off hours as well if kids are in need.
And we've had that. We've had that where we've had to have law enforcement react because, in that situation, I think our counselor for that school was out of town, and the principal, I think, was actually the referee in basketball. We have to help out wherever we can. And so our school resource officer was actually one that responded one time to one of our alerts.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your community and about Hardin. You said it's on the Crow Indian Reservation.
Yeah, so Hardin is actually a border town, so that's a unique dynamic, border to the reservation. Okay. I had previously worked in a school that was actually on the reservation. Coming into a border town was a little bit more of a challenge because you do have an additional dynamic. But yeah, I mean, we're a community eligibility for free and reduced lunch. The majority of our students would qualify under the free and reduced poverty levels. About 90% Native American. We actually have a pretty large growing population of Filipino students.
Oh, wow.
A large percentage of our teaching staff is actually from the Philippines, and so kind of a growing culture, so it's a dynamic, changing community. 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, Hardin was more even split between our white students, which is a lot of times is farm and ranch kids, and our Native American students, which we do also have several ranches and stuff on the reservation. But it's shifting, and we're becoming more of a Native American community. And so that's one thing we've tried to do through like our Portrait of a Graduate and our strategic planning processes. How do we reflect those different cultures, and how do we integrate those into our everyday school day? Because even if you live in our community and you aren't Native American, you've still chosen to live on Native American land. It's important that you learn that history and you learn that that culture. We also service a fairly decent sized portion of the Northern Cheyenne Reservation as well too.
Okay.
So we have kids. We have a lot of kids that have generational trauma, generational poverty, and we had an earlier conversation today we were talking about the number of grandparents that we're seeing raising children now, which again an amazing tool for parent guidance for somebody that's in their 50s or 60s that's now raising another generation of kids. It's a different challenge than it was 20 years ago. I think we all realize that. Yeah. So a tool to help them with that as well too through the parent guidance, I believe.
Yeah, no, there's a course just called exactly that, grandparents raising grandchildren, and there are real considerations, things I hadn't ever thought about until I watched the course. One of the things it talks about is just receiving the child for the first time, and you can no longer be just the fun grandma. You've got to be the disciplinarian, and it changes the dynamic. So and that was actually a request from a Native American population in New Mexico. So the psychologist who is our leader of that course is also Native American. You also talked about that it's really hard to get psychologists. It's not that you guys don't have the money for that, it's that the people don't exist, right?
Yeah, right now in fact, I'm trying to encourage my daughter to pursue school psychology because there's such a shortage right now. For Montana, we're a pretty large district, just under 2,000 students, about 1,800 students, I guess. Yeah, we're only 40 miles from Billings, which is one of the major population hub, but we haven't been able to contract a full-time school psychologist in the 3 years that I've been in Hardin. We're able to subcontract out, so we have people that do day work, and they help us with some of our identification of our special needs student on a per student basis, but we don't have that person there that every day in and day in and out that can be a reference for our staff or can do that, kind of, affinity groups with kids or different things, that kind of that proactive, preventative type of stuff. Yeah, we struggle, even like I said, even though we're close to Billings, we still struggle with staffing. My first year there, I believe we were short about 15 teachers. We've been able to kind of make a dent in that this year, but like this year, I think we're short 2 counselors at the high school level.
And so a lot of your teachers are driving in from Billings or somewhere between Billings and Hardin?
Yeah, there's not a lot of housing in Hardin. That's a challenge that we fight with on that a little bit. There's not a lot of rentals and those type of things, so we do get a lot of people that drive back and forth, which hurts us in the long run as far as keeping people because if you can get another job and not have to drive 40 miles, I mean, that's a savior sometimes. So we're working on a lot of like grow our own type things, programs where we can try and encourage current high school students to go into teaching, but also tapping those paraprofessionals and those other folks in our schools that don't have a teaching degree that we know could be good teachers. And the nice thing about that is they're already living in the community, they already understand the community, and they're more likely to stay long-term rather than just get a couple years of experience and move on. And I mentioned our Filipino teachers. Like I said, we have about 20% of our teaching staff are from the Philippines. A lot of them are on J1 visas. And the challenge with that is it's a 3 to 5 year, and then they have to go back. But we actually have some teachers that are on their second tour of duty with us, if you will. And so that's been a real positive for our community.
That's great. You are, people just don't understand how many things a superintendent really does in a day. I always talk about this, but in your community, I would assume that you're the largest employer.
Yeah, we're one of the 2 or 3. Yeah.
I would assume you run one of the largest budgets.
Yes.
Largest transportation organization.
Yes.
Largest food service organization.
Yes.
Largest social work organization.
Yes.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you're in charge of the academics, you're in charge of the buildings, you're in charge of, everything that's out there. So how do you take care of yourself as a leader?
This is not one of my strong points. I'm one of those that oftentimes takes the job home more than I should. Really just trying to unplug when I can, getting out and doing the things I enjoy doing, golfing and spending time with my family. I've been trying to make a decision to do a better job of that, being able to step away from things, trying to get in the gym a little bit more and stuff. Honestly, something like this, like being here at the NCE conference is really, a lot of times that's a pressure valve for me, because you're able to get and connect with people and realize we're not the only ones dealing with this. You're not the only one dealing with that problem. So that collegial network is a huge part of it for me as well too. And
I know you're a real leader and a learner. As a matter of fact, last year you were almost the national president of AASA. You were number 2, but I was rooting for you. But I also, you've taken advantage of going to Deloitte and doing those things. Tell me about Deloitte and that experience.
Yeah. I ended up being the runner-up to David Law, who's the current ASA president, and well-deserving. David's an amazing guy, and he and I have continued to do a lot of work together. And so it's my conference is a lot more low-key than his is this year. So I'm kind of appreciating being that runner-up. Deloitte was an amazing experience, and this was something that you put on my radar. I didn't really know much about it, and I remember you talking about it I also helped lead the one of the co-leads on ASA's Leadership for Wellbeing and Learning cohort, focusing on mental health and social emotional learning.
Which Cook Center started, by the way.
And I just remember you mentioning Deloitte on one of our planning meetings, and then it bubbled up again, I think probably 6 months later. Just an amazing experience. I bought in big time. I was ordering their books and reading about business chemistry before I ever even went, just because of the exposure to it. And I was part of the pilot project, and then I helped facilitate the first cohort. And it's honestly, I just had this conversation with a colleague last night. For the cost and the experience, it's the best bang for your buck in any kind of professional development I've ever done in my career. To be able to have access to a Fortune 100 company's research and staffing, and they treat you first class. It's amazing. I mean, your whole trip usually costs less than what the hotel would cost coming to a conference like this. And so I've actually sent my entire team to the Super Courageous or the Courageous Principles 1, and we're starting to get people to part 2 of that. But no, anybody that gets a chance or gets the invite from Deloitte, I would highly recommend going to that. Like I said, in my whole career, it's been the best bang for the buck in terms of the value for professional development, and then also the relationships that are forged over those 2 or 3 days. We spent time with Brad and some of the guys from Clark County that were in my group earlier today, and just you kind of build that friendship and expand your collegial network as well too. Yeah, I just highly recommend it to anybody.
And it's really interesting when 2 superintendents can sit down together, and one has 375,000 students and one has 2,000 students, but you find that common ground, because the common ground is you're educating children and working with staff that are committed to children.
Yeah. So when I help facilitate Super Courageous 1, one of the things that we talked about, myself and the co-facilitator, is you bring your own problem. So if I go to a conference like this, and not taking anything away from NCE, this is one of the best conferences every year, but I'm going through the catalog going, okay, this pertains to me, this pertains to me. but I'm not sitting down with a bunch of other experts and talking about my specific problem. Whereas at Deloitte, you can bring that in, you can sit down, and I can have a superintendent, assistant superintendent from Houston, and assistant superintendent from Las Vegas, and 5 or 6 other superintendents from these different districts of varying sizes sit down and brainstorm my specific problem or share resources from when they've had to deal with a similar problem like that. Like that expands your collegial network and your knowledge base like nothing else. And it's great value for the school district as well too. One of the things I'm most proud of in my district that we've been able to do is our alternative school, the Bighorn Academy, and we've really expanded that. And when I came to Hardin, our graduation rate was below 60%. And so we're really working hard on that. But I know when I sent my principal to Deloitte, he had a very specific problem for that school that has 80 kids in it.
Yeah.
And he came back feeling like he had the proper solution to that because of that collective knowledge base that was in the room to help him with that.
Wow, that's great. So tell me something about yourself that we don't know.
Something about myself that you don't know. You know, I guess I'd say one thing is I grew up, things weren't always easy for me growing up with my family. My dad worked in the oil fields and a lot of times was gone. We were right at that poverty line a lot of the times. I was one of those families that was below the poverty line but too proud to ask for help. Nobody in my branch of the family tree has ever gone to college before I did.
Wow.
And so I'm the first college graduate in my family. But I didn't even think, like as a junior in high school, I didn't even think college was even an option for me. I was really looking heavily at the military because I thought that was a more realistic option until my senior year. And I really got tapped on the shoulder by coaches and teachers that I had, or else I don't know that I would have ever set foot on a college campus. And so when I talk about, you know, that role modeling and those type of things, I certainly am where I am now because of I got into education first and foremost from the role models I had when I was in high school, primarily coaches a lot of the time, and then had no intention of ever becoming an administrator and got the tap on the shoulder to become a principal and had to go back and take classes. Had real no interest in becoming a superintendent, and then one of my mentors, who ironically actually works for me now, he's helping me out with some facility stuff. He just said, you know, the best thing for you as a young administrator is to go to a small district where you have to do everything because you're going to learn what you like and what you enjoy and what you're good at and what you don't like. I always say when I was in my late 20s, being an athletic director at a big school district would have been like my dream job because I kind of came to education from the coaching side. But then after being an AD and realizing you're away from your family every Friday and Saturday, and you know you're getting phone calls because the credit card didn't go through for pizza, or you know something happened on the bus. You know, that's one of those jobs I wouldn't want to touch with a 100-foot pole now as being a big school athletic director. Found my love for curriculum and the student services side of things like what we're talking about here as well too. So. But yeah, I would say that's the thing that most people don't know about me is like...
You're a first-generation graduate.
Yeah, and when I was 17, I didn't think that I would ever go to college.
Wow, well, so that really talks to mentorship. And so I am going to bring it back around to staff guidance because, you know, staff guidance is really about providing that mentorship to any teacher anywhere, or the bus driver or the lunch lady or whoever. But tell me about staff guidance in your district.
Yeah, and I'm a huge believer in mentorship, and I do a lot of work with new administrators and aspiring administrators through the colleges and through our state organization. And one of the things I think is really important is I think it's important for everybody to have a mentor that isn't necessarily their supervisor. I think my principals can be much more open to somebody that comes in as a coach that they know isn't going to be the one that evaluates them at the end of the year. It's kind of that less judgmental type of a situation. And I think staff guidance kind of expands that to all of our teachers and is available for everybody. They can have that mentor that isn't in the building. It's hard. It's hard to swallow our ego and go to somebody that teaches down the hall from us and say, hey, I'm really struggling with classroom management, or hey, I'm really struggling with lesson planning or assessment, because you still feel like you're going to be judged in the teacher's lounge or in the hallway or whatever it might be. So what I love about the staff guidance is it opens that up. And we talked a lot earlier about how much we struggle to get staff and keep staff. And so something like that's a tool that we can do, that we can offer, that not every school district is something that I think that can differentiate us and make people want to stay in our district, but it also helps those teachers avoid the burnout and makes them feel supported. You know, and you've heard me talk, and we've had this conversation. My staff mental health is just as important to me as my students' mental health.
Absolutely,
You know,
yeah.
and I'm one of those people that believes that, you know, especially mentorship and setting an example runs downhill. Like, I always try to treat my principals and my directors the way that I want them to treat the teachers, which is also the way that I want our teachers to treat our students. And so I think staff guidance can be a huge part of that. And even if you know what you're doing, it's nice to have that second voice saying, yeah, you're on the right pathway.
Yeah.
And I think staff guidance can provide that. And again, from the district level, I think it's a way for us to differentiate and try to keep our staff and keep them from burning out.
Yeah, I love that. I think, you know, one of the things I think about is when you were talking about the mentorship piece of it, is when you have a live mentor, you don't want to, you always are worried about, oh, I'm going to take up too much of their time, or I'm going to do this. And so,
Yeah.
so I think it's great to have a live mentor, and I think everybody should have one of those. But you're like, oh, I don't want to ask this dumb question, or I don't want to take up too much time, or whatever. And that's kind of where the staff guidance, digital mind of Dr. Skinner can come in as that extra voice, like you're saying.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, Tobin, thank you so much for joining us. I think I could talk to you for hours. Thank you for being a strong leader, building strong communities. And what I love about you, Tobin, is your impact is so much bigger than Hardin and Montana. Your impact really is building this nation when it comes to education and the work you've done over time. So I'm just so impressed by you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ann. I appreciate those kind words. I mean, it's definitely humbling. And I appreciate the partnership with the Cook Center over the years. And I think you guys are great at answering that question. Why not? Instead of what if? Like, what if we try this? Well, why not? Let's try it. Let's give it a go. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we learn something, and we'll do better on the next time. And so you guys have been great partners with that, because I'm not one that's afraid to come up with crazy ideas, and you guys have always found a way to make them work once we've had those discussions. So I appreciate the Cook Center and all the work that you guys have done with us.
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us.